were meeting with a logistics company that was building a new headquarters. And while we're having this conversation, talking about what we offer and how it's better than them just shopping on their own, the CFO keeps picking up the TV remote and hitting a button because the TV says, going to sleep in 5 minutes. And the CFO was finally like, for the money that you guys are charging, what's the big ad? And I said, I can make it to where you don't have to pick up that remote anymore during your meetings. And he was like, I didn't even realize I was doing that.
Quick, change the channel.
On this episode of AVWeek, consolidation. Is Resimercial real? All that and more coming up on AVWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is episode 629. The family is growing. This is AVWeek, your weekly wrap-up of all the news in the audio-visual world. I am your host, Brian Heidgerken. Tim is out at CEDIA and CEDIA Expo getting his steps in. Joining us this week is Kelly Teel, a new mom. Congratulations.
Thank you. Happy to be here again.
And also, you're the building technology designer at HGA. Dyslexia is a terrible thing, but thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Also joining us is Nancy Blanchard, AV industry business development guru. Hello, Nancy.
Hello.
And Nyere Hollingsworth, a VIXA board member and collaboration productivity senior manager at Grainger. Welcome, Nyere.
Hello, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Our first topic this week is from AV Network's Newsmaker story. Biamp acquires Evoko. They're adding room and desktop booking along with wireless presentation to their mostly audio lineup. I know they did 2 years ago branch out into control with some touch panels and keypads. So what's this say for Biamp? I mean, where are they going?
We've had conversations about this before with Biamp, and I think they've been expanding their product portfolio for some time now. So I'm not completely shocked that they acquired Evoko because it also allows them to expand their product offerings, which they've again been doing for a while. And then I think they're also trying to potentially incorporate Evoko's technology and products into their existing lineup to create new solutions for customers. So I think as far as where they're going with this, I think it's just market diversification at the end of the day. They're diversifying their market and their presence and their customer base by gaining access to Evoko's existing customers and markets. I think part of that is also the integration, technology integration aspect where they're trying to integrate the intellectual property into their own products and solutions, which also enhances their capabilities. I mean, none of us can say for sure what the end goal is or what surprises Biamp will have for us in the future, but I think they're definitely taking this as a competitive advantage, and the acquisition, I think, is providing Biamp with that competitive advantage in the audio and video, now video conferencing industry, because as we all know, they were primarily audio. They were the audio related market. So, and then last but not least, I think it's, revenue growth. I think this is something that, if it works out, it's going to lead to increased revenue for Biamp and through the sale of those products and also some cost savings. So I think that's a kind of broader picture of what's to come for Biamp. But I don't think this will be the last time they have an acquisition either. So I think we're definitely going to see more on the video side from Biamp. I think we're going to see more acquisitions related to video and video conferencing products. And, I'd like to eventually see what their statements are, about their plans related to this acquisition and then the ones that they have in the future.
And Biamp's not unique in this case, right? I think everybody's looking to expand beyond their core business and kind of be that complete manufacturer. You can buy everything, from the speakers to the control system all the way through to the end. So Yeah, Nancy, how are you seeing the possibilities here with Biamp and their addition?
Well, the flavor of the year is ecosystem. That's what everybody refers to everything as. And the way that I see this, um, similar to, Legrand, I will say with Harman Samsung though, is they haven't expanded. They're just keeping to the common core JBL crown, etc. I think it's more the Legrands and the Biamps that are, as Kelly said, expanding as a means to be able to generate more revenue, be able to reach out to more customers that they didn't necessarily have. So with this ecosystem, is that they can go into the consultants and to say, hey, one-stop shop, instead of a mixed bag of different manufacturers, how about you spec in all of our products? And I can say that from interviewing with a manufacturer, that was one of the roles, was to be able to talk to consultants and say, hey, you don't need to go outside. You can provide everything through, ABC, and it'll be easier for you to spec. And that's how I'm seeing it from Biamp is now. But then the other confusing part, like Kelly, I got up on Biamp's site and it's like 15 product lines. How the heck does a regional manager be able to know 16, 15 different product lines? Or is it that they're going to have like the different divisions divided up and you have a specialty? That's in the back of my mind from being a territory manager and being a consultant liaison, is how are they going to manage all of that?
Well, especially getting away from their core audio business. If you're a DSP expert, speakers and that type of microphones kind of play into that. But when you start getting in those other realms, it's a whole nother category there for you to have to add your specialty to. Nyere, I being a designer for about 20 years now, the whole concept of, oh, you could just spec all Biamp or all this manufacturer. I like to I like this and I like that. So I like to kind of a la carte it. But I know there's a lot of pressure from the manufacturers and they're giving you a lot of good reasons to stay within their umbrella. How do you see that playing out going forward?
I mean, it's an interesting play throughout the industry as many of these companies stretch out into markets that they traditionally have not played into. I think it's, as Kelly mentioned, diversifying the portfolio to lock in some level of revenue consistency and create some revenue growth is the thrust behind this and other acquisitions in similar companies, so that they remain relevant in the space, because this is an opportunity to reach out to that customer that maybe is in love with Evoko and never heard of Biamp, and so now they have an opportunity to sell them DSPs and speakers and media bars and all the other aspects of their product portfolio. So from where I see it for their business, it makes a lot of sense. For me as a buyer, yes, I'm familiar with them, but me as a buyer, if I wasn't familiar with them, now I have another opportunity to reach out into a portfolio again, that I may not have been familiar with otherwise. So net, I think it should work out for them. We'll proof is in the pudding and all of that, and hopefully they, I fully expect them to continue to expand their reach, so that they remain relevant and available to other markets.
Well, and I think this consolidation, both on the manufacturing side, but also on the integration side, is kind of a sign of a continued maturing of AV. I know I've talked with other industry leaders and, it's like, when did AV start? And some people are like, well, the minute there was a video projector, or, that phonograph back in, the turn of the century. But I think, we've made a lot of strides in the last, 30, 40 years. And I think COVID really helped us come to the forefront a little bit more, at least in my interactions with architects and building planners, of, it's not like, oh yeah, we do need some video conferencing or some technology in the space. Now that's more, it's early on in the process. It's like, okay, this is a space that's going to have technology. Let's start talking about it before we even develop maybe the size and the shape of this of the room, which I think is great, right? Us getting in earlier in those conversations. But with this acquisition, Nyere, back to you, it's good until it's not good. So, how do you feel about that continued acquisition? By no means do I think we're done. We're still in the early phases of it. But, if we get down to that core of, like they always had the big three automakers, it's like, oh, we have the big three AV companies, that kind of concerning too.
Well, when you look at it, within our industry, our largest companies in our industry pale in comparison to, some of the companies that we call customers out there in the marketplace. So this level of consolidation is inevitable given the speed of technology and the speed at which money changes hands internationally. These kinds of things, it's unfortunately creating a space where it's really, really hard to be a smaller manufacturer, integrator, what have you, because the cost of doing business is so much higher. The cost of capital is so much higher these days with interest rates and inflation in certain parts of the world. So it's just right now today, it's a really hard time to be a small business, unfortunately. And the larger businesses are taking note. You look at some of the largest integrators out there, they're owned by private equity, and so that's a whole nother element of it that we really don't see, but we definitely feel it. Because that's what's fueling a lot of these acquisitions. The private equity wants to get their pound of flesh out of these companies that they acquired, and so they push to grow these markets and these revenue streams to ensure that they get some sort of return on their investment. So just the economics of the day are unfortunately creating that world, and unless you have a really compelling niche product that only you can make and produce and sell, then it's going to be really hard for you to compete with these larger companies in the world, just because they can afford to make more mistakes than you can as a smaller business.
Well, and I do find, we are a kind of a niche or a boutique part of a larger technology industry, but AV specifically, I go around, and one of my other jobs is to talk with architects and interior designers, and they really don't have a concept of what we do or what we can do, what we do, and how we do it. And so that's part of the fun, though, is going out and talking to them about the industry. And they're like, wow, you guys could do that? We always wondered who did that, And so to your point, when we talk about consolidating our industry, it's a pretty small group, even the big people in our industry.
Yeah, I mean, from experience and also talking to somebody else, because they recently were bought up, I guess you could say, by an investment group, is the dynamics change. And that's where I feel the passion of why we're in this industry, what we like to do, has dramatically changed, because it's all about the bottom line and it's all about numbers. And it's every quarter got to meet the numbers. If you don't, the investors aren't happy. They start becoming, nervous. And I know that, the smaller companies, like Nyere said, is they look to the investors because now that's additional capital, so that, they can go out and hire more people, or, they such as engineers, they can invest a little bit more to be able to work on, the next new product and things. But inside, even with the environment, it changes. And, when we look at like the AMXs, I was territory manager for AMX back when Scott Miller, the CEO, was there. It was a fun environment. It was a team environment, but they worked hard as well, but they were proud. And I don't see that anymore. I see that it's just, it's changed, and it's all about business. Get it done, get it done, get it done. And, when you look at the trade shows, when you're talking about smaller businesses, it is so expensive to exhibit at Infocom or even ISC. And companies have asked, should we take that money, maybe do more regional shows smaller shows? How much leverage, how much do we really get out of it with leads and ROIs and things?
Well, and Extron dropped out years ago and
Yeah.
still haven't been back. So you're right. And that culture of AV is changing. Some for the better, and some, the maybe the larger seeing it as a cash generator that can put a lot of stress, especially on the people day to day.
But that's funny what you said about Extron, because Harman did that one year. It was Infocom in Vegas and said, you know what, we're not going to have a booth anymore. And then at the last minute, I guess FOMO or something, they had a suite that was in the lobby so that they could still show products and bring people through.
Aside from the dilution of the focus and how that can divert attention away from the core business, which leads to a loss of focus and potentially declining performance in the existing operations. There's also the financial strain aspect, and then there's also integration challenges as well. That's I feel like one of the major downsides to, I don't want to say too many acquisitions, but the wrong acquisitions, or the potential to have acquired companies into the existing corporate structure, and you don't put the time, because these are very time-consuming operations. And then like Nancy said, the cultural differences, the incompatibility aspect, management may clash, ideas may clash, and again, there's just that financial strain that can also be a factor, and just the hurdles of acquiring a company, and the regulatory challenges, and just also brand and reputation risk. We all know that with acquisitions, there is that risk, loss of autonomy. I mean, there's a lot of downside. There's a lot of good things about these acquisitions, but there's also, as you stated, there's a lot of downside to it. And I think there's always going to be those risks. So, I think a lot of the times you got to outweigh the benefit versus the risk. And I think what Nyere and Nancy have said is spot on. And I feel like that's something everybody should consider when these acquisitions happen.
Well, a number of times we've talked about cash, right? Because cash is the oxygen that lets your company breathe. Years ago, I was at, oddly enough, AMX training down in Texas, and I was talking with a business owner who was in the same class as I was in. And we got to talking at dinner one night, and one of his struggles was that cash flow, right? Because he was doing very high-end houses in Canada, but the timelines on these projects were making his business struggle for cash, because he was doing outlays for cable, and I think he said some of these houses had $1 million worth of AV in the house, right, with security and surveillance and everything. And he was looking for some ways to get into something to where he could supplement that those homes. And we got to talking about higher education, right? Because most colleges, you got the spring break, summer break, winter break, where they do 10, 12 rooms that you can work through them most of the time, especially standard classrooms, really quickly, and then they pay their bills and you're back to your residential work. Which leads us into the next topic I wanted to talk about, and it comes from Tim Albright, actually wrote it for AVNation, about Resimercial. It's real, and that's that blending of the residential companies and the commercial companies, where they're trying to do a little bit of both, dip their toe in. So Nancy, yes, we're all part of the AV family, but that residential side and the commercial side, they are siblings of a very different nature, and working in both of them is a struggle, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a different beast, a whole different beast. And my question when I was reading Tim's article is, you've got a manufacturer. Well, there's the residential, they buy from certain manufacturers for their gear. And then you have us, which is commercial, and it's pro AV. So all of a sudden, if you have the residential integrators that are sort of crossing the line and doing a little bit of commercial, how does that work? Is the manufacturer now going to allow them to be able to buy the commercial side of it? to be able to work with their customers, for home offices and things like that? Or, and then what if a commercial integrator finds out? I mean, there's a lot of crossing the line here that makes it seem like there's some gray areas. And the home office. So is that where a residential dealer is working with their client to outfit it? Or is it the company that is going to work with another integrator to outfit that home office?
Well, and Nyere, I mean, with your background, to Nancy's point, getting the product for a resi company, that could be a struggle for someone.
Yeah, it's a struggle for some of the resi integrators that are out there. But I know if I picked up my phone and said, "Hey, big integrator, will you go put some gear into my CEO's house?" They'll do it. They'll do it. So, yeah, the lines are blurring, and I think we are only seeing the tip of the iceberg of what we're going to do in some of these more senior executives' home spaces that is now probably 60% of their workspace. So it's there has to be a blurring of those lines these days because we've already blurred the lines of work and home. And that quite naturally makes it creates a space where some of these commercial integrators can play in. Now, I know a lot of them that just won't touch that business at all, and they'll pick up the phone for me and quickly sub that work out, and I know that, and that's okay. So I think there's enough to go around for everybody. If we do this smartly and continue to show the promise of well-designed and well-done spaces, whether they be in the home or whether they be in an office, then the businesses will still get those phone calls. The integrators will still have space to compete in. The manufacturers will still have products to sell and places to put them. And all of us will look good because we've done great things to create collaborative solutions around our industry. So I don't look at it as a bad thing that these lines are blurring. I look at it as something that's going to help us all continue to grow and develop and provide solutions that really make us see and hear each other much better around the world.
So the CEOs were using Savant in their homes. And when they started opening up the Apple stores, the CEOs were adamant that not to have AMX, which actually did end up being AMX in there, but to put the Savant products in. And it didn't matter what the integrators were saying to them of, no, that's not a commercial product. It's not going to work. They were forced to. So they put Savant in and they ended up having to rip it all out because it just did not work properly. But that was coming from the CEOs down.
Well, it was what they were comfortable with. It's what they knew.
Yeah.
So Kelly, I mean, as Nyere was talking about, all four of us currently, I'm assuming, are working from home. So, that blur is real.
Yeah. For the first half of my career, I worked in high-end residential. And it's completely different, as Nancy stated. On the flip side, when I started kind of going more into commercial, still kind of doing residential, but also going into more commercial, they would also ask to use Sonos in a commercial setting. And it works to a degree, depending on what you're trying to do, in an amenity space of a building, sure. So there was constantly asked for a commercial product in a residential setting or a residential product in a commercial setting. And, like you said, these people who own these gorgeous houses and they're installing their own systems have used a product before, and they're very adamant about using that product. May not be the best solution, but it's what they know. I think if you do it properly, you can enhance or leverage, I guess you could say, commercial AV gear in a home office, through the use of microphones and sound systems and video quality through cameras and even projectors or monitors. there's going to be a little bit of a, I guess you could say, a use case study that needs to be done in that aspect. So, if you want a control system, or if you want something more than just the average, what we probably all use, an integrated camera with a headset, it can be done. It's just that there is that fine line between, using a product that is specifically tailored for residential design and control systems versus what you would use in an office space. And I think with more people working from home, that's going to become more of a request. And I'm already seeing it in some of the designs that I do for office spaces. And, they're asking for these products that I would use at home. And
Right.
I mean, to me, it's like it works for being at home and working from home. But, it's going to save you some money, sure. But at the end of the day, you've got to take so many things into consideration. It's product selection, lighting, the acoustics, the collaboration tools you're going to need, the cable management, the networking, the control system type, the display solution. I mean, and then what happens if you follow what they want to use, and then it's not a good design, and then they're upset with you later at the end of the day. So
Yeah, we've all probably had those clients, right? Where it's like, well, we're just going to use the same TV. I have this TV at home. It's great. We're going to put
yes.
it in the boardroom. And real quick, funny story of that. We were meeting with a logistics company that was building a new headquarters, and we had the CEO, the CFO, and head of IT, everybody there. And while we're having this conversation, talking about what we offer and how it's better than, them just shopping on their own. The CFO keeps picking up the TV remote and hitting a button because the TV says, going to sleep in 5 minutes, even though there's a computer image shown. But because it's a residential TV that they picked up at Sam's or Costco or something, it's like, oh, there's no motion, there's no video. And we're going through it. And finally, and the meeting was going really well. So I felt I could be a little bit punchy. And the CFO was finally like, for the money that you guys are charging, what's the big ad? And I said, I can make it to where you don't have to pick up that remote anymore during your meetings. And he was like, I didn't even realize I was doing that. And it's like, right, but like every few minutes you're picking that up. I go, we can make the systems easy to operate, and that's that difference to where, we're the the technology experts, and yes, sometimes we do get ignored. We give them our best advice and they go, yep, we understand that's what you're recommending, but we're going this way because I'm comfortable with it.
I mean, I had a similar situation recently. We had an active classroom, and as you know, active classrooms can be very pricey. And one of the asks was to have video conferencing at all these pods. And we originally gave them, and it was pretty high budget. And understandably, they wanted to come down in cost. And one of their internal team members said, hey, let's just do these owl devices for video conferencing.
I knew you were going to mention the owl.
Yeah. And it's funny because that was my reaction, is I knew the owl was coming, because I get asked so often, and as cute as they are, and they're, an all-in-one video conferencing device, there's just some settings where it just may not work the way you want it to work. And we ended up making it work in this, because they ended up kind of scaling down on the video conferencing needs, and it worked. And in this one scenario, we got lucky because, we were able to explain, these are the limitations, this is what you'll get with it, and this is how it'll work. And they were okay with that. And, it did save them money, but those owl devices are perfect example, because they get brought up so often as a replacement for real video conferencing systems that may be pricey, but they'll do what you want them to do. And then it's like, oh, the owl device. And, as much as I think they're so cute, I just think that those are literally what you're explaining right now.
Yeah. And you're right. They are absolutely wonderful for a table of 4,
Right.
Maybe 6. But when you have, 20 people sitting at a long table, and I don't know how many times I go into architecture firms and there is a Logitech, C930 webcam on top of a TV at the end of this table. And it's just like, can we talk about your guys' technology when we're done with this call? And which we do a lot, because when they see what's out there, they're like, wow, we didn't even know you could do stuff like that, and then they start feeling a little uncomfortable about what maybe they're presenting to their clients as their, well, this is our boardroom, and, we're using dual owls on the table or something like that.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned a 4-person table, because that's the reason we made it work, is because we only put them at pod tables with like 4 to 5 people. And it's only a few tables. It wasn't a room-wide video conferencing like we were going to do.
So Brian and Kelly, the bad thing about that is, like, yes, those conversations aren't going to stop as long as we have lower cost consumer products. Good thing about that is that's the whole reason I have a job. Is to explain why this is not going to work in, your 50, 20-foot long boardroom and what have you. So, what it boils down to is that, us on the commercial side, we've got to do a better job of marketing ourselves outside of each other. Because the superior solutions are there, but we do a terrible job of explaining, what they are and how they work to our ultimate end customers. And so, yeah, like I said, those conversations are going to continue to happen. But the good news is that, you're finding more organizations hiring folks like me to help them make better decisions about how to outfit their spaces, because in a lot of ways it's existential for them. And the commercial side right now, like, the reason that you have an office is to bring people together. So if your solutions to bring people together and relate to the folks that aren't up to par, why do you have an office? And so the good news is the people organizations are getting smarter about bringing on technology specialists that are primarily, come from the AV world, so that they can rationalize those investments and do the right thing for their colleagues in the organization.
I agree. I think all of us on this call are in the same position where, those conversations are, as much as we dread them when they come up, it's like, yes, okay, that's why I'm here. I'm here to explain why we need to do that. Well, I really want to thank all 3 of you guys for being here this week. It was a great conversation. I always enjoy filling in for Tim when he lets me sit in the host seat. But if people want to reach out to you guys to talk to you more about work and follow you outside of your visits here on AVWeek, what's the best way for them to connect with you, Nyere?
You can find me on LinkedIn. Since Twitter doesn't exist anymore, I don't exist on it anymore. So, to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Nyere Hollingsworth, happy to connect with you.
And Nancy, how about you? What's the best way for people to reach out and get a hold of you?
You can reach me on X, which I'm quite active on there with the AV community, as well as LinkedIn, and both of them are at Nancy Blanchard.
That's where I found her. And Kelly, when you get back into the swing of things, after you enjoy your time with your new one, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
I am also on LinkedIn. That's the only thing I'm on right now, especially because X doesn't make you create a profile to browse anymore. So I don't have a profile on there. But on LinkedIn, I am under Kelly Teel, which is Peel with a T. I used to say teal like the color with 2 E's, but it was just easier to say Peel with a T. So I am on there.
Awesome. Great. Again, thank you guys all for joining us this week. And don't forget to check out AVNation.tv or any place you find your favorite podcast for more AV Week and other AVNation podcasts. Check out the Architect podcast, where we explore relationship between architects and technology. Not sure about the host, but I hear the guests are pretty good. Thank you again, and we will see you guys next time.